Part 2. So, part 1 was inflammation. If you check out my last post, I'm going to be doing 5-part series or 5 posts of how calories can be affected outside of just the calorie in, calorie out conversation, and how there's a lot more to think about that can go on in play when you're thinking about your calories in, calories out. So the first one was inflammation. It's called, I think it's epicaloric control, and basically it's factors that play into when you're consuming a calorie and when a calorie is not a calorie. So part 1, inflammation. Part 2 is going to be type of food. So specifically, I'm going to be talking about what a calorie is and what happens when it comes to eating a whole food and a processed food. So the page or website that I'm referring to at the moment is Precision Nutrition, and the study, which I'll just roll down, I'll link both of these anyway so you can have a look through them if you're interested, but it's energy expenditure in whole food and processed food meals and the implications for daily energy expenditure. So basically the argument here is, saying a calorie is a calorie. For example, if you're eating 100 calories from candy and 100 calories from kale, they're both the same. That's what this is saying. And if you eat, fewer calories than you use, you'll lose weight. So, can't argue part 2 really, unless you get really deep into it. But part 1 is flawed in a few ways, saying a calorie is not just a calorie, especially when it comes to the type of food. So we've got the thermal effect. Now, scientists have 3 names for this, and it's DIT, TEF, and SDA. So you've got dietary induced thermogenesis, thermal effect of food, and specific dynamic action. So that's, digesting the food energy cost. So it says here, on average, a person uses about 10% of their daily energy expenditure digesting and absorbing food, but this percentage changes depending on the type of food you eat. So this is what I want you to take from this video, is depending on the type of food you eat is going to have an impact on how, it's digested, absorbed, and how much calories, your net gain is going to be. So protein, it takes the most energy to digest. 20 to 30% of total calories in protein eaten go to digesting it. Next is carbs, which is 5 to 10%, and then fats 0 to 3%. So, essentially saying if you eat 100 calories from protein, your body is going to use 20 to 30 of those calories to absorb, digest, leaving, with a net gain of 70 to 80 calories. Pure carbohydrates would leave you with a net of 90 to 95 calories, and fat would give you 97 to 100 calories. So it says maybe a calorie, is a calorie, doesn't hold up after all. So you can see the differences there. If someone's telling you eat 1,000 calories of protein, 1,000 calories of carbs, or 1,000 calories of fat, they are all going to differ in your actual net gain of that calorie you are consuming, because, the effect is different once it goes into your body, as is just explained there. So going to the study, it's only a small study and short. So the study compared what happened when 17 volunteers ate a whole food meal versus a processed meal. Volunteers were all of a normal weight and they were about 25 years old. So it says the researchers used the term meals loosely, since the meals were cheese sandwiches. In this study, the metabolic impact of whole food sandwiches made of multi-grain bread and real cheddar cheese were compared to processed food sandwiches that were made of white bread and cheese products. I believe it's the little square plastic things we used to all eat as kids, unless you still eat them now. So it says, just going over, obviously bread is a processed food, but just to a different degree. So it's got the energy composition of the 2 meals here on the table, which you'll have access to a link. So I won't go through all the calories, the fats, the carbs, the sugars, but they're relatively the same between the whole meal and the processed food. And it's also got a list of the ingredients in the breads, which is pretty interesting because there's about 14 ingredients in this piece of bread. Pretty interesting when you dive into the ingredients, what they're actually doing to your body once they get in there. But anyway, moving on. So we'll go down to the study here. So it says, eating and energy. After not eating for 12 hours overnight, researchers measured the volunteers' basal metabolic rate using oxygen consumption. So BMI, you've heard it everywhere. Go on Google, stick it in. You give your height, your weight, your age, male, female, how active you roughly are, and it'll give you a BMR, basal metabolic rate of what you need to survive. This is where the problem lies with giving out templates. You can go online, get your BMR, get a macro template, and then off you go. And yeah, it doesn't it's not great long term when you do that method, but you can see how easy that is. There's a bit more science behind it when you dive a bit deeper into it. So it says the volunteers were randomly given either a processed food sandwich or a whole food sandwich, and then volunteers' metabolic rate was measured every hour for 6 hours after the sandwich. 2 to 6 days later, volunteers came back into the lab and did exactly the same thing, but with the other sandwich. So essentially, if they had a whole meal sandwich, they then come back and had the processed one and went through the same process. So results: people tend to think healthier food tastes worse than less healthy food, but in this study, volunteers rated whole food sandwiches more palatable, 6.5 out of 10, compared to processed food sandwiches, 4.9 out of 10. Again, that's subject to the individual and what they enjoy. But it says to note, no differences in how they energetically they felt after the 2 sandwiches, and they felt no difference in how full they were. So remember that for this next bit, because however, eating the whole food sandwich took 46.8% more energy to digest on average than the processed food. The total energy needed to digest and absorb the whole food sandwich was 576. The processed food sandwich was 310. So you can see the difference there. Same amount of calories consumed, whole meal, whole food, the processed food. You've got a different net gain of your calories there due to how your body is actually using them. It's got 2 figures then of the BMR over the 6 hours, 2 graphs. So it says, what explains the difference? Protein and fibre play a part. In table 1, we can see whole food sandwich had more than protein, 40 grams, and fibre than the processed. This explains the differences between the sandwiches, but not entirely. So it says, it shows you can lose weight eating processed junk food, but you can eat a lot more whole food with more important nutrients and lose the same amount of weight. That's why we say when you move to eating whole foods and get off processed, you actually need to eat more. People are surprised in how much they actually can eat when you're just eating whole foods as opposed to processed. Lots of these processed foods, as soon as shove them down your gut, it doesn't take a lot to digest them. They're just getting sizzled up, hence the conversation around here. So it says, if you didn't have enough reasons to avoid processed foods when losing weight, add reduced thermal effect of food to the list. Processed food takes less energy to digest and absorb compared to whole food. So 100 calories of processed food ends up being more net calories than 100 calories of whole food. That is the takeaway of this. 100 calories of processed food ends up being more calories than your 100 calorie of whole food. So it goes on to say, you know, if you're trying to lose weight, eat whole foods. If you're trying to gain weight, if you're trying to lose weight, eat whole foods. If you're trying to gain weight, you may find you need to include a little more processed food for a while. Probably disagree with that. Why don't you just eat more whole foods? However, you get the point. So, takeaway from this: a calorie is not a calorie. Just another, another factor to play in there. You've got 3 more to come. If you've got any questions, or you've got any research that I can look through that says the opposite, I'm always trying to learn and give you guys, what I believe to be true. So if, there's anything out there that I can go back through and say, I was wrong, or, we found this, I'd love to see it. If you've got any questions, or you want me to do a video on a certain sub or like area of this, let me know, and hope you enjoy.